against my better judgment and a much funnier answer, I guess I'll go with D. But the pineapple citrus on the rear end sounds really cool.
It's only one way to find out.
This segment of DoD TV is brought to you by Ram Trucks. Guts, glory, Ram.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild Podcast, episode number 171. Yeah. It's titled The Plot Thickens.
You're Tim Chelswick. I'm Matt Drury.
Heck yeah.
And as hard as they try to get rid of us, we keep coming back.
Of all the people, like the outdoor personalities in the entire world, we are two of them.
I don't know why or how. Well,
the bar's pretty low.
I was going to say, I mean, just about anybody could call themselves an outdoor personality.
And they do.
So I think we're not winning.
And we do.
Winning any credit there. But we're here.
Yeah,
so,
we're talking food plots today.
That's right. We got a really cool guest. But before we get into that, we got some business to take care of.
We do have some business. So we got shout outs. Heck yeah.
Yep. Soundboard's still here. We love accountant. Mark and Terry haven't taken it away yet.
We love it when you guys give us feedback on whatever podcast platform you're listening on, or even on YouTube. You can just leave comments in there. So our first shout out comes from Chasing Deers. It's the guy's name, Chasing Deers.
And drinking beers.
He titled it Killing It. It says, just love you guys and all the great tips you give. Thumbs up.
Look at this guy.
Thanks, man.
I don't know what sound effect this is, but he's going to get it. Okay. Now I know what it is.
Okay. Sorry about that one, Chasen.
You suck, Matt.
How about you take the next one, Matt?
All right. Next one's from Minnesota Bo Tile Quit. And it just says, just stop. So I didn't read the show notes ahead of time. So Tim gave me the one that's probably most applicable to himself.
Yeah. So we're going to sit here in silence for the next 40 minutes or so.
So this one does deserve this sound.
Can't say we disagree with you, Minnesota Bo.
So Minnesota Bo thinks we suck. Well, join the club, fella. Get in the line.
So if you want to leave us feedback, just go to whatever platform you're listening on and rate us. And give
apparently
us
good or bad, we read it. So if it's PG, we'll put it on air.
We are dedicated to the truth.
That's right. Unlike most of the media in America today.
Fake news.
All right. So what's next?
Let's feature some dirt.
All right. So this was something that we started with Toxie and Chris Holly. A few podcasts back. I think we did one with Terry on the 248. We did one maybe last podcast. The one Wade was on, I think.
Yep.
And this is our third one. So the Mossy Oak Properties featured dirt. When you step off the beaten path on this Montgomery County, Kansas farm, there's something that feels magical. Steep ridges run from the north and stop on the property, creating lookouts over the Elk River bottom. These ridges are a part of a bigger network of terrain and timber known as the Sycamore Valley. These giant blocks of privately owned land create the scenario that big buck hunters are looking for. Extensive long-term management of the deer herd has been conducted on this property as well as the neighboring land. Weighing in at 143 acres, this farm fights like a heavyweight champ.
They weighed the farm.
Want more info? Check out the link in the show notes below or Google Mossy Oak Properties 49818. Lastly, but not least, you can call the agent Matt Wanzer at 620-330-7289. Nope, that's wrong. 7282.
620-330-7282. That information will also be in the show notes.
Rewind, start over.
If you call the other number, let us know what happens.
I know that's a long read there, but these properties are pretty awesome. They kind of hand select them because they're properties they feel like might relate to our audience. And it's not like they're, hey, 143 acres is a great piece of land, but I think we're trying to pick pieces that aren't going to totally be out of the price range of the majority of the people out there. So anything from 40 to a couple hundred acres, that's what we're trying to target here. And they've done a good job of picking these out for us. So definitely check them out. Mossy Oak Properties.
Heck yeah.
All right. So
let's thicken the plot, shall we?
Let's do it.
The food plot, that is. Do you see what I did?
No.
We're talking food plots.
I should have done the cricket sound effect.
Cricket or fart, either one I was kind of expecting. We've got Austin Delano. He is Mossy Oak BioLogic's food plot guru. This is the guy that actually comes up with the seed blends and decides what they're doing. And
I didn't know that. I knew this. He is the guy that helps us every time we have a problem or a question or anything. It used to be Bobby Cole. We called him Bobby Logic, but he's a famous author now. He's too good for the podcast. He's just too good for us in general. So Austin's been happy to step in and take his spot. Isn't that right, Austin?
That's right. I'm kind of waiting on for y'all to maybe read a few more mean tweets. That's highly entertaining.
We got them. So
people don't hold anything back.
Yeah, it could get real ugly if we wanted it to.
Right.
Well, so this is a busy time of year for you, obviously down there in West Point. You guys are probably shipping more seed right now than you do any other time of year, or at least if the buyer is a procrastinator like me and Tim, they're probably just putting their order in and saying, man, can you ship it? I need it yesterday. Are you getting a lot of that right now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's crazy. Really, the last 3 months have been crazy. I guess you could attribute it to people having more time to get out there and do stuff, with them being off work or with a more relaxed schedule somewhat. But seed sales have been good. And it's a crazy time of year because we're kind of right there in the middle right now where, guys in the north have already planted. Guys in the Midwest are kind of in the middle of it. Yeah. And then guys in the South are gearing up for it. So right now it's a really crazy time of year. It's our time of year where we got to make hay though. So this is, it's supposed to be busy.
Yeah. So just to start off, what would be one of the most common questions you guys get down there? And what is the answer to that question before we jump into this thing?
Yeah, man, there's a few of them that we really get hammered on just, almost on a daily basis. If I just had to pick one, it's probably going to be, what can I plant for my deer at a particular time of the season? Sometimes that question is early, sometimes it's late, but that's probably one of the most asked questions is what can I plant for my deer for the early season or full season growth? And, I usually answer that with, hey, let me give some details from you, because to give you the correct answer, I need to know where you live, what type of critter you're hunting. Are you talking about deer or are we talking about just turkey or everything? And then also, what time of year are you hunting that particular piece of property? Is it something you save for the late season, or is it a place that's just really good early and that's the only time you're really going to key in on it? Or is it a box blind you're going to be sitting in for all 3 months of the season?
Yeah.
So I usually try to get some details from guys before I just give them a vague answer. But y'all know as well as anybody, there's things that seem to work really good early. There's things that seem to work really good late. Mm-hmm. So I'm really going to try to get those guys keyed in on when do you plan to spend the most time in that particular set to help them plant what I think is going to help them the most.
It's funny. That's the most asked question because that was going to be my question for you, for me personally. So we'll keep moving on here.
There's also a show happening, but let's get your answers out of the way.
Well, I was going to say, so I do have a question. So we have a food plot, we call it the staging plot, and it's, I don't know, maybe an acre. And it currently is in radishes. The last few years we planted in radishes. I think 3 years ago I planted it in winter bulbs and sugar beets, and they just did not touch it until like February. I mean, it was really late until it was too late, frankly. And so Mark, and Terry are like, oh no, you got to start planting radishes. So we started doing that a couple years ago. And once we did that, it's been amazing, the amount of early season activity we get in this food plot. Well, this year, my farmer is, his rotation of crops, he decided not to plant corn or beans. And that's a real big part of my strategy. It's right behind my blind. And so that staging plot, they feed out into it from the timber, from the bedding, and they work their way into these big ag fields. Well, this year it's in, I forget what millet or Milo or something like that. And I'm a little concerned about what it's going to do to our late season strategy. And so I was thinking, okay, I still, Mark keeps saying, oh, you just got to kill them early. Okay, great.
Let me write that down.
I'm not that good. So let's just pretend like I'm not going to kill one early and I'll be hunting there in December.
Hypothetically, Mark.
So if that was the case, I still want to have the early season success and palatability with the radishes. So I had asked Mark this. I was like, would you mix in something with the radishes? Or he's like, well, Final Forage is kind of that, might be that a seed blend that you want. But he goes, I would, and I'd go with radishes and I'd just kill them early. Just kept sticking with that. And so I thought I'm going to keep asking people till I hear what I want to hear.
So here we go.
What would you do in this scenario? Just knowing that my late season strategy of either having the ability to buy an acre of corn or an acre of beans from the farmer isn't there for the late season, and knowing that radishes, for me, I just have not had great success after about gun season in Missouri with radishes. I mean, early on they just hammer them, but once gun season, right around that time, mid-November, late November, they just, it's not something they hit anymore. So what would you do in that scenario? Would you mix something in, or would you think about planting the food plot in half radishes and half, something else, Final Forage or whatever?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of splitting the plot up rather than mixing something else in and potentially not getting the ratios just right and one thing not growing as well as it could because we've got a little bit too much competition in that particular spot. So if I was in the situation you're in, I think I would try to potentially make the plot bigger if that's a possibility.
We did that.
And just go in there and let's say, okay, we're going to have a bow set up primarily for early and mid-season right here with radishes. We know that's going to work. And if the deer doesn't act right, we don't get something killed. Maybe we've got an acre of Final Forage or Maximum over here on the backside that we can set up for, with some later season wins.
Notes.
That might be an option you can go with there just because, like you said, the further north you go with the radishes, they're unbelievable early and mid-season. Now, possibly the only downside to radishes is they're not quite as cold tolerant as, say, a lot of our rape and turnips that we use like in Maximum or winter bulbs and sugar beets. But it's also the reason why they're so good early is because they're not as cold tolerant. So usually the earlier the maturity rate is on these brassica family plants, the earlier they like it in the year. So something that's got a longer maturity rate, like the green globe turnip we use, they don't really like it early on in the season. And that's the way we want it. We really don't want them eating it in October, November.
Yeah.
We want it there in November. We want it there December, January when they're really hungry. So we really key in on the radishes like you're talking about for that early season, because the cold weather, sometimes when they get some real heavy snows, depending on how long they had to grow and develop that big tuber in the ground, sometimes that forage is just wiped clean to the dirt by the time the rut gets there. And there's not a lot going on in that radish plot. And that's what we see a lot is just they hit it so hard, there's not a lot there. So I would rely on something that's a little bit more geared towards cold season, snowy, hard freeze type weather. And that's going to be the Maximum or the winter bulbs and the sugar beets.
Which is Final Forage?
Final Forage is kind of a marrying of the two. So with Final Forage, we took the radish, we took the green globe turnip, which are kind of polar opposites of each other in that most all deer will eat the radishes very early. Even deer that have never seen brassica family plants before, like you were talking about your deer not really keying in on those winter bulbs and sugar beets that first year until like February.
Yeah.
That can be fairly typical of deer that A, have a lot of choices or resources to go to other than that field, or B, they're just not really used to brassica family plants and they haven't really acclimated to that being a major food source yet. So the radishes are almost I don't want to say a guarantee, but they're probably the closest thing to a guarantee where if I really want the forage output that brassica family plants give me, and my deer have never seen that before, I'm going to start them off with radishes.
Yeah.
Because there just doesn't seem to be a very steep learning curve with it, like there seems to be with some of the other brassica family plants. Now, everybody's deer are different. you can plant that some places and they don't eat it for 3 years. And then all of a sudden they act like it's the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
And then other places you plant it the first time and they wipe it out in October. So not everybody's deer is the same. And obviously everybody's weather is different from Florida to Canada where we sell this stuff. So, but kind of in general, those radishes work really good early. The winter bulbs and sugar beet type varieties like our green globe turnip work really good late. So the final forage blend is three things. It's the radishes. We've kind of got a mid-season rape in there, and then we've got the late season turnip. So if your deer are used to brassicas, it's kind of the perfect combination of three different maturity rates: an early, a mid, and a late. And so it's also a coated seed, so it's going to germinate a little quicker. It's going to come out of the ground really fast. And we've really moved a lot of it this year. It's really grown in popularity the last 2 seasons.
That's what I need to know. We're planning tomorrow, by the way. That's why I'm asking all these questions. So
if you're not watching the show on DeerCast or YouTube, you're missing out on watching Matt literally taking notes on everything Austin is saying right now.
This is reminiscent of my school years where it's the day before the test, and I'm just now trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing.
Stuff out.
So I can't read.
I am exceptionally interested right now in this topic because you and I have not talked about this yet. My buddy Tony Cantrell, TC Property and Landscaping Services, just bought a bunch of food plotting equipment. And for the first time, I will have food on my hunting property.
It makes a difference.
Because I'm like, I think a lot of guys that are hunting on handshake deals, wherever they can get access, they don't own the property, they're not leasing the property, and so they have limited access. Things are changing a little bit this year on my property. So my buddy's got all this equipment now. We mowed last weekend. We're gonna do some spraying and burn off all the weeds and stuff. And so I'm gonna have radishes early season. I am so excited.
Yeah,
it's gonna be a total game changer. So I'm super interested.
It should be, because all of a sudden they're going to one. They're actually, you got a place where they're gonna head.
Use them to suck them in. Yeah, because they're eating acorns and natural browse. And Austin, I was listening to the Cousins podcast, Fistful of Dirt, and he had you on. And I thought it was, so this is how dumb I am. I thought it was getting really spiritual because you guys both kept talking about soul. And it's like, wow, they're talking about the soul. Then I realized you guys are talking about soil.
Well, they are from the South.
You didn't. It took you a while to tune into my Alabama accent.
took me a little bit, or my accent. And you said something very interesting about, because I think this could probably apply to a lot of guys, fertilizing. And I don't know if you call them noxious weeds, but like ragweed, milkweed, stuff like that. Just fertilizing the ground can sweeten up native plants that are already there. And that still has an impact on the deer, essentially drawing the deer in by fertilizing native browse.
Yeah, it's a kind of an overlooked tactic to use. I made a post the other day on Instagram on my personal page about a piece of timber that I'm helping a friend of mine manage. And he's already got the food plots. He's got plenty of them. So food is not a big issue, but cover is. Trying to create some more bedding and escape cover for these deer. And, in this particular area, one of the best ways to do that is get rid of timber, because it's 95% timber and 5% openings versus something y'all might be used to seeing, which is maybe the polar opposite, 5% timber and 95% openings. So we just there's no CRP in this particular area. There's no really nice bedding to speak of. You've got pine plantations, you've got food plots, and you've got mature timber. And so there's not a huge diversity there for staging for deer to come in and bed down in areas that are not a pine thicket. Mm-hmm. So we created some of those by clear cutting low quality timber and, letting all those shoots and suckers come back up from the roots, whether it be oak, hickory, all these different types of hardwoods that are going to try to come back from their stumps, which for a year or so are really good food. But they very quickly go back into 6 and 8 foot trees. And then, within 2 or 3 growing seasons, you've got a forest again that's starting that turns into bulldozer work. So we essentially just went in there and used herbicides selective herbicides to keep the woody growth from taking over and fertilize the native grasses and the native weeds to take over and essentially create a sweetened up bedding zone that has plants in it that deer are going to eat. But they're also going to want to bed up right there. And, fertilizing that was really easy. I mean, it was, we took a lime buggy through there, limed the area, neutralized that acidity a little bit so that our fertilizer would work better for us. And then went through there with, just a real basic balanced number fertilizer just to sweeten that area up. You can do that on field edges. A lot of people have noticed that the areas they plant food plots in, the deer tend to browse on the edge of those food plots as well, because a lot of times there's things on the edge that they do like. And all of a sudden, over a couple of years' time, a lot of that fertilizer is working its way through that native browse that's, hanging over the edge of your food plots. And that's why some of the native plants taste better when they've got, some higher nutrient content to them.
Well, to me, it gives guys that maybe don't have food plots or can't put them in a little hope that they can do some things to sweeten the property to keep the deer on their area. I know Dr. Grant Woods made a post in DeerCast last week. He actually did a nutritional analysis of ragweed and a couple other native plant species and found like they're pretty high in crude protein and fats and things that you just wouldn't think are very nutritious. Like this is the general species of we call them weeds mostly, but these noxious plants, they actually have quite a bit of nutrition in them and the deer go to them. I think Queen Anne's lace was another one that he said had quite a bit of nutrient value and that we overlook, but the deer, because they live in that area, they know those things and they go to them.
Yeah. Old field management, some people might call it, or fallow field management of these areas is really fairly simple. And everybody's got different weeds. That's what's cool. You know how it is when you're turning a food plot over with a disc or with a tiller. If you don't plant it, you get a pretty quick flush of weeds that's going to come up. Mm-hmm. And you can get a different flush of weeds, obviously, depending on what time of year you turn that soil over. So, if you turn it over in the fall, you might have a totally different crop of weeds come back before the hard frost set in and on through the winter versus what you're going to get if you turn that dirt over in the spring and the summer when the soil temperature is a little warmer.
Sure.
So all those things kind of play into effect. But it's really easy to improve areas with fertilizer by increasing the nutrient content and increasing the taste, the palatability of those plants just through sweetening them up a little bit.
So you mentioned the disking or tilling. So tomorrow, we were going to till. We've been spraying our food plots and preparing it in that regard, killing off the grasses and weeds. And so we're going to till and plant. If you till and plant, do you recommend cultipacking it in some way, shape, or form? Like, whether it's putting a pallet behind a side-by-side and putting some weight on it, or, what do you recommend in that regard once you do to help kind of prepare that seed bed, I guess?
Yeah. Cultipacking is kind of highly overlooked a lot of times because, we all get real jacked up about getting the ground tore up, getting the disc or tilled, and then getting seed on it really quick. But especially with these smaller seeds, whether it be Maximum or one of the clover blends, like a non-typical clover, a lot of these fall seeds they're really small. And so they have a tendency to get buried too deeply if somebody tries to go in there and kind of cover them old school with a disc, like they used to cover up oats or something that, they can stand to be buried 2 inches. But if you bury your brassicas or your clovers that deep, you're not going to get hardly any germination. So cultipacking helps out on several levels. If I'm going to plant one of these smaller seeded blends, ideally after I get done disking or tilling, whatever I use to cultivate the field, after I get done, I'm going to use that cultipacker to firm that seed bed back up and kind of press out the airspace so that I've got a lot more even distribution of seed because I don't have a lot of areas where I've got, for instance, your footprint goes down 6 inches and the area above it is just a big fluffy, root zone. I want it more uniform. So I get uniform germination. So I take that cultipacker and go over it after I get my ground worked up, broadcast my seed, and then ideally cultipack it in or lightly drag it in. If you don't have a cultipacker, using your tractor tires and, like you said, a pallet, a piece of fence, anything to where you're going back over the food plot, pressing out all that airspace and kind of just giving a lot more even seed bed for that seed to land on, so that it's not a big fluffy air-filled seed bed where seeds can, let's say you get a 2 or 3 inch rain and that seed gets pulled down really far and it just can't germinate. So the other thing cultipacking really helps out with is helping that moisture move through the soil profile more correctly. Because let's say you go out there and disc something 6, 8, 10 inches deep with a really good piece of equipment. There's a lot of airspace in that. And when a rain hits it, it doesn't move evenly through that soil because there's some areas that are a lot more dense with old root systems and stuff than others. And so your germination is going to be very spotty a lot of times, where you've got a lot of airspace in the soil that hasn't been firmed back up. And it also dries out really quick. A lot of people, the South in particular, our key time for planting fall food plots is also usually our 2 driest months of the year, September and October. Mm-hmm. And so that doesn't really lend itself to good food plots if you don't take some steps to help yourself out, such as cultipacking. So if you've got good moisture in the ground and you go in there and work it up, cultipack it and broadcast your seed and cultipack it again, that first rain you get is going to move through that soil a lot more evenly like it did before you worked it up, versus if you just rip it up with a tiller or a disc, broadcast your seed and just leave it. A lot of times you come back and you're like, oh, it looks really good over here where my tractor tires went back over it. And then you got some spots over here that were untouched and it's just like 1 or 2 plants growing.
So you would till it, then cultipack it, then put your seeds out and then cultipack it again?
Ideally, that's the way I like to do it.
Okay. Yeah, that
I know that's throwing an extra step in there, but it helps.
Okay. Yeah.
And Austin, if you don't have to say soil for our benefit, if you want to say soul, I'm jealous of anyone that has a Southern accent. I wish I had a Southern accent.
Do you want me to punch him?
I'm used to it, man. I know I've got a terrible accent. I can't help it.
Tim and Matt actually fight on the show.
Be the cold open.
Throwing haymakers. One of the things you and Cuz were talking about. Now, Cuz is all about getting his grandkids onto deer, and he's, he wants a lot of deer. He wants them to have an exciting time. What about? And I'm thinking about taking my daughter out this year, getting her in the blind with the crossbow. Are there any special considerations for planting around a blind where, maybe you're taking out someone who's not a hunter later in the season and they're going to sit in a blind? Like, how would you plant around that?
Yeah, that's definitely something to think about. And obviously, like the property you were talking about that you're going to participate on this year, you don't have time to do it this year, but going down the road, if you already have an area picked out, let's say for a ground blind or, just a short 5 to 10 foot blind that you're going to try to get kids in, where it's about having a target rich environment versus, hey, we're trying to kill a booner in here. I like to try to do things in those type of situations where obviously I'm going to improve my odds by maybe planting some cover right around my blind just to disguise it a little bit, giving myself a little bit more margin of error on kids ratting around in the blind and making racket and doing what kids do.
Yeah.
So, that blind spot blend we've got, it's an extremely tall growing forage sorghum variety. Mm-hmm. And so if you get that stuff planted, let's just say, take for instance, in the Midwest, sometime in like mid-June, by the time October rolls around, it's going to be 10, 12 foot tall, and it's going to provide, a really good screen for moving in and out of a food plot, where maybe you've got an opportunity to pull a buggy up there pretty close. If you've got somebody elderly that can't walk very far, you've got kids that, if they walk a half mile, they act like they're going to die. I mean, there's all kind of situations, but it allows you to kind of disguise and your entrance and your exit, not just coming to the stand, but hey, we all want to leave the field sometimes and there's 73 deer out there. and they all hear you get out and, see you walk across the field. And that, in my mind, sometimes I think that may educate them way more than them seeing a doe get dropped in the field with a rifle.
Sure.
The entrance and the exit to a stand is critical. I mean, Mark, Terry, Matt, you guys have been, y'all been waving that flag for a long time. Hey, you got to pay attention to your entrance and your exit. So using something like that to also plant around the blind area, I think really helps to help you have some natural concealment. So it's not just a square blind sticking out on the edge of a field that it's already a little bit foreign to them, but they put up with it because they've got food. So if you've got some really good natural cover growing around it, or you grow the cover and then you put the blind in and brush it in, I think it gives you some extra concealment, for areas where you're going to be in there with, say, non-experienced hunters or people that just haven't spent a lot of time trying to be quiet and be still for deer.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
I think it makes sense.
The name makes so much sense. Blind spot.
Another thing you might kind of think about is how close you plant your food to your blind. So, 10 yards out, or, you don't want them eating right up against the thing. So
I can pet him on the head.
You want to think through that as well.
Yeah.
It's a little side note, Tim.
No, thanks for I'm going to write it down.
I'm waiting.
It's Matt, right?
Matt, yes.
Okay.
2 T's.
Matt says.
Okay.
I made this mistake myself years ago when I first introduced my wife to bow hunting. So I had this area on the edge of a food plot picked out with white oak acorns dropping. And I thought, this is a slam dunk, with a good wind, we're going to see deer. And of course I hear the deer coming in behind us, moving through, chomping acorns, coming to the food plot. What I wasn't thinking about was how close the shot might be versus how far it might be.
Yeah. That can be just as far as a far shot.
This big jughead doe walks in there and she's at 4 yards, basically, and I hadn't trained my wife how to shoot a deer at 5 yards. I'd been more concerned about her shooting one at 25.
Yeah.
And how to hold a pin on a deer that's, where you're right on top of them versus you're not having to worry about that angle so bad. And, she hit the deer a little high. And it was because she held the pin exactly where she should. But when they're at 5 yards, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And,
it's like 30.
I got to thinking about that when you said that, because if you've got food planted right up to your stand, if you're shooting with a compound bow, it can create problems.
Well, and if you're, say she's shooting a crossbow, which a lot of youth or, people you're introducing into the sport, like that's just as big of a problem. If they're right underneath you with a crossbow, that's impossible to take a shot.
Yeah.
So I don't know if your blind is going to be on the ground or elevated, or
I'm not going to tell you.
Well, then
So
screw you. Then I'm done helping you.
That's it.
Let's help somebody else.
How about keeping your small food plots from getting tore up before you can actually come in and hunt them? Or how do you keep deer out of them?
Yeah, that's a problem that a lot of people have, even with a moderate deer density. The small quarter-acre food plots that are kind of tucked away somewhere, they can just get smoked. I mean, if you get 6, 8, 10 deer at night eating them, they can knock a dent in a really well thought out and planned food plot really quick. There's several options. Probably the least expensive one that seems to work is, for years we've made this tape and this liquid called plot protector. It's just a real simple piece of 1-inch poly tape, and it comes with a little small jug of, it's not a chemical. It's called putrescent egg solids. It's been around forever.
That sounds terrible.
It's been in the garden. Yeah, it sounds really bad. It's been in the garden industry for years, but it's just something that smells really bad to deer, and they don't really want to feed right up next to it. It doesn't completely blow them out of the area or anything, but the combination of that white tape and the smell, sometimes it's just enough to keep 75, 80, 90% of your deer from jumping in there and just smoking the food plot when you really need that food to last, say, into November. Just a quick example. I had a really cool lease in Tennessee years ago, had some really nice bucks on it, but they don't start acting right until December, really, on that place. Last week in November, first week in December. And so to have food on small food plots on a lease, we had to protect them. Yep. Otherwise, there's 53 slick heads out there every night just mowing it down to a putting green. And so we double taped these small food plots off with that plot protector. And I would have cameras set up kind of wide angle, time lapse style to see where the deer are coming and going, how they're reacting to the fence. And it doesn't keep every deer out. It seems to keep a lot more of the mature deer out than it does any of the other ones. Some of the really, young, dumber deer are just going to walk right under it and just go start feeding. But, your older deer, they're a little bit more wary. They've had more experiences. They know something's just not quite right. And they would walk up to it, look around and say, I think I'll go somewhere else. So it's an option to keep them out of those smaller food plots so they don't get over browsed and that you have some food left by the time you really want to hunt the plot. Some people do the electric fence route, which is, a lot more expensive and it does take some time, but there's options out there if that's what you have to do.
What about a scarecrow that looks like Mark Drury?
It'd scare me.
They obviously going to recognize he's a killer.
I don't see any deer anymore.
All right. So did we utilize Austin enough yet with our own personal questions?
What are you doing next weekend?
What are you doing tomorrow? Can you make the drive up to North St. Louis here and help me plant a few food plots?
Is there anything else kind of big on your agenda or that you just feel like people ought to know regarding food plots at this time of year?
Something we've really dealt a lot with more lately, because I think we've done a little bit of job marketing and making it available for our customers, but it's always been there, is our soil testing service. It's really a highly overlooked part of growing crops. And it does take a little bit of extra time and effort to do it. There you go. That's what I'm talking about.
We got one.
Yeah, it's a really valuable piece of paper that costs you $9. But it takes out a ton of guesswork on knowing what the dirt in the area that you're fixing to plant does or doesn't need.
How does a person go about getting that test done?
The easiest way is just to go to plantbiologic.com. There's a tab over there that says soil test. Click on it. You buy it, put it in your cart, and all the directions are there.
Okay.
You don't have to have a kit. It's as simple as taking a heavy duty Ziploc bag, a sandwich size Ziploc bag, knocking the top of the dirt off, get the plant material off the top and putting a good double handful of soil in there and sending it off to the lab there in Memphis and letting them analyze what's going on in that particular place that you're fixing to plant. A lot of people will do they used to farm this ground. It should be fine. Or they grew crops here for years, or the complete opposite. Nothing's ever grown here before. It should be good. But you just don't know.
Yeah.
There's no way of knowing by looking at a piece of dirt how fertile or not fertile it is. So that soil test is going to tell us a current pH level, the current level on the acidity of the soil. It's going to give us our phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and calcium levels. And so by looking at those and looking at the pH, and also you're going to have an option over there of checking what you're planning to plant. Mm-hmm. So when that soil test comes back, it's going to give you what your current status is, as well as the recommendations for the crop that you say you're fixing to plant. So if you were going to plant non-typical clover, your pH level recommendations might come back a little higher. Because, clover or alfalfa, they really prefer in that 6.5 to 7 range is where they really want to grow their best at. Versus if you're saying I'm just growing wheat, well, you don't have to have an almost neutral pH to grow a really good crop of wheat. It'll grow with, down there in the low 5. So the line recommendation is not going to be quite as high for a cool season annual as it is a perennial.
Okay.
Yeah. For instance, on that staging plot I was talking about, Scott had done a soil test, and so we checked that we were wanting to plant radishes. They recommend a desired pH of 6.5, and our actual soil pH was 6.2. So we're not too far off, but it tells you how much.
Yeah, you're starting off really good right there.
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of detail here, and it goes into exactly products available in our area and all kinds of different things that it goes into. So yeah, it's pretty handy. And when we started, I think last year was the first time we actually did that. And, it did make a big difference. The way our food plot looked last year was the best it's ever looked, frankly. So you might think you can do the guy's way and just go do it yourself. And I'll just put lime on and fertilizer. And it did make a huge difference for us last year.
Austin, do you suggest? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, as you said earlier, that probably top 3 most asked questions is going to be, what fertilizer do I need for this particular crop? Well, give me a soil test to look at first. Otherwise, I'm just kind of giving you some vague recommendations, of what that family of plants likes to have. But your dirt might be totally different. You might have really high phosphorus and potassium levels, and you really don't need to add a whole lot except nitrogen, or your pH level is 5.2. And I really wouldn't spend the first $1 on fertilizer that year. I'd spend all my time and effort into getting it limed so that lime can start working on the acidity of that dirt, so that the nutrients I have in the soil already become more available. And then any that I add in the future are going to be a lot more available for that plant. So, a lot of guys will get a soil test back and it'll say 5.2, but they don't go through the steps to get any lime added. Well, at that low of a pH, your fertilizer that you add, at least 70% of it at that level is completely unusable by the plants. So in a lot of cases, that's chunking a couple $100 bills out the window on the way to the farm. So I'm going to spend my time and energy into getting it limed first, because without it, the current nutrients in the soil and anything I add to it are just not near as available to the plants and the root system until we get that pH up into that 6.2 to 7 range, where most food plot crops are going to thrive.
Okay. I imagine that you'd probably, like, if you're putting in plots, maybe the same property, but different areas, would you want to get soil tests done on each particular plot?
Yeah. That's something we get asked a lot. Hey, I've got a 5-acre food plot. Do I just go to the middle of it and take one? Or, how do you go about doing that? And, if you don't mind spending $9 per sample and you've got a 5-acre field, I'm probably going to take 3 samples. Oh, I'm probably going to take one, a third, 2/3, and all the way towards the end and mark them off. Hey, north end, middle of the field, south end. And so when you look at that, it may come back and they all be within spit distance of each other, or you might see a major change in one side of the field and the other. And not to get too detailed, but if you look at row crop farmers and what they do to get their best yield, they'll go out and grid sample a 200-acre field, and they'll have a ton of tests across that field, because they might see that one end of the field is really high in potassium and the other end of the field is super low. So when they start adding their fertilizer, they're not going to throw a bunch of potash down on the side of the field that doesn't need it.
Sure.
They're going to put their money where it needs to be versus where it's already got what it needs. So yeah, if it's a large field, split it up, take a few samples. If it's a 1/4-acre field, one sample is going to be plenty. And, if there's 300, 400 yards in between plots, it doesn't hurt to go ahead and take a sample off of another plot, particularly if there's a ridge in between it, because soil types can change very quickly within a very short distance of each other.
Yeah, this is obviously an area where I'm doing a lot of learning, and I can see why people get so deeply into it, because it's so fascinating and just fun. There's so much to learn, but there's also so much impact on the condition of your deer season.
Well, there's a lot. I was going to say there's a lot at stake, because when it doesn't go well, then all of a sudden you're wanting to learn how you messed it up, because it makes a huge difference. One year we didn't end up. I had never used a seed coat before. This is good, dating back probably 3 years now. 3 seasons ago. And I remember, I'll never forget it, because Mark and Terry you ought to seed coat that. And I'm like, I always get rain. I always get rain on, in August here. I'm right by the river. I'm not worried about it. Sure shit, I didn't get any rain. And
oops,
it looked like desert. I mean, it was.
They were probably real cool with you though afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
Respectful
So,
in their feedback.
I mean, I remember like it showing up on 13 and they were making fun of it and they were talking about what not to do, like those kind of things.
Snake bit Matt.
So I got a gigantic 5-gallon bucket of seed coat that next year. And I always say, like, all right,
lesson.
We got to seed coat it. We got to seed coat it. And it's rained so much this year and we're late. It just, I don't have any equipment. And so I have to hire a friend of ours that has a small tractor and some implements. And he lives out of state now. He moved. And so he's coming back in town and we had a short date range to narrow in on. And I knew this was going to happen where it's rained so much and we've waited so long, but I was just kind of stuck with this date that the future forecast looks abysmal. I mean, it's like horrible. And so,
there's nothing you can do about it.
I'm going to seed coat it and hope like heck that we get lucky with a few spot rains. And if not, we've already talked about it, trying to go in and water, we got, a little thing we could put on the back of Can-Am or whatever and go in and try to water it. If in 10, 15 days, probably 10 days, we don't see any rain at all. I'll try to go do, help it as much as we can. Yeah. Which sucks, but it is what it is. You gotta, when you don't have the food, it's just a huge difference, and especially what we're trying to do in filming and getting them into one certain area. Which is what everybody's trying to do. I get it, but it's a lot of pressure and food plots are key. And really, dating back 15 years, that's where we kind of got our start with television. It is where we got our start with television. Toxie and Mossy Oak came over and said, "Hey, we got this new product, Mossy Oak BioLogic, and we want a TV show and we want you guys to help educate people on how to, make food plots."
Yeah.
And that's what we did. We had the BioLogic Challenge in the middle of Wildlife Obsession. If anybody remember BioLogic and Drury's Wildlife Obsession, it started in 200003. And
wasn't even alive then.
Dr. Grant Woods was involved back then and Bobby Cole years after that. And it was something that I think really changed Mark and Terry's perspective on food plotting and
it's a paradigm shift.
Food plot architecture. And we get a lot of crap about it now from the audience who hates seeing box buy hunts over food plots.
Yeah.
But our success has gone through the roof doing it that way and planting to have them come to you instead of you crash into the timber and try to, not get winded and your access in and all that stuff. We still hunt like that in the rut, but when it's a little easier to get away with some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But early season, late season, especially late season, like those, they've had a lot of success with food plot architecture and doing exactly what Austin and the guys down there at BioLogic kind of showed us the way back when. And there's no turning back for us. So I think if you gave it a shot, no matter how large or small, you'd see, that it does make a huge difference in getting your deer to kind of congregate into one specific spot that you're sitting in.
So stay tuned, everybody. We'll see how bad my season doesn't suck this year.
One can only hope, right? Can't get any worse
than last year. Well, how about we help out our buddy Parker from Wisconsin?
All right. So the question of the day is proudly brought to you by RTP Outdoors, home of the groundbreaker 3-in-1 food plot implement.
It's good timing on that. RTP
Hi, DOD
piece.
clan. My name is Parker from Southwest Wisconsin. My question is, do you guys use lights when entering or leaving your stands in the dark? And do you have any fear of those lights alerting or spooking deer in the area as it's some sort of an additional beacon? Thanks and good luck this season.
Thank you, Parker. And great question.
Yeah, let's hear. I got my thoughts, but I want to hear Austin's first.
Okay. I do not, but I'm not against it. I don't particularly think they spook deer from great distances, but generally I try to have entrance and exit already mapped out in my head, where I'm going into the stand, how I'm going to get back out of there well enough to go in there with a very dim headlight at best, something that's just projecting right in front of you. I know y'all spend a ton of time tracking deer. I've been doing it since I was a kid. I like tracking deer as much as anything and seeing why they do what they do after they're shot, all that good stuff. And when you're doing that, through the years, you see what lights when your tracking buddies are out in the woods seem to really show up and which ones don't. And, they make these cool headlamps these days that basically you can see your feet just fine. And 10 feet away, the guy can't see it at all. So I think one of those is probably your best marrying of the two. If you don't really like to alert game with a bright flashlight, but you want to make sure you don't fall on your face, something like that's going to work great. I don't think you have to go in there with a 5,000 lumen spotlight to get to your stand,
Yeah, I would agree with you. Like during the rut, especially when we are hunting those timber spots and you're trying to make a very quiet and, covered entrance in the dark. If we are in a spot where it's like, oh man, I just need to see, all right, am I still on the right path? Cause we'll try to go in obviously in the summer and clear those paths out so that it is a little bit easier. And you kind of can tell without a light that you're on the right spot. Sure. But if you do need it, usually I'll have something in my hand, a very small, like you're saying, a clip light for your visor, hat. Yeah. I'll put it on in my hand and I'll literally just every once in a while just slightly turn the red on or whatever, just to make sure I'm still on the right path and continue to go. But I try not to use it as much as little as possible. And as far as getting out in the dark, I never, ever use it. I mean, it'd have to be, I don't know, pitch black, and dark of the moon or something. And some reason I just needed, usually I would never, the problem usually in getting out is you're spooking deer that are on the fields or whatever. So I'm trying to be as less of a footprint as you possibly can have. Right. So me personally, but you might have a different perspective. You hunt a lot in the timber and you have to climb in and climb out and put up your stand a lot of times. What's your thoughts here? Yeah.
Kind of the same with you guys, as little light to no light as possible. And I've hunted these places I hunt for so many years now. I know my way in and out, and your eyes really do adjust to the darkness if you let them. Any kind of artificial light, short of red or green, your eyes will kind of revert back to seeking unnatural light, and it just makes it hard to see in the dark. So I will use a red light if I need to do something, untie something with my hands after dark or something. But on the whole, I try to avoid using lights. Even that, like when you're in your tree stand, you climb up in the morning, you're in your tree stand. Like I try to have my gear in my pack so that I know, all right, when I zip this up, this should be here. Order of importance. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so try to think through all that stuff. Very, very minimally do I have to use a light in the stand even. You should be able to feel out. And like you said, with any bit of light, natural light, should be able to kind of see silhouette of what you're doing. And so I personally, I'm sure it's personal preference, but try to not use it at all if I don't have to. And by preparing ahead of time, getting your paths cleared out on the way in. Right. This year we got a new path into one of our favorite timber sets, and it is so new that, Scott, he trimmed it out, but he went and put thumbtacks out, reflectors out just in case. Cause also Wayno hunts there, and I want to make sure that we are crystal clear on where you got to go to get to the stand. But typically speaking, we try to do it without and be prepared, have your stuff in your pack ready and the places where it's at. Your trails are trimmed, all those types of things. If you're prepared, you're less likely to have to need it. Sure. Now that said, I have walked up on deer with red lights, and it just doesn't seem to, I don't think they can even see it. I've walked up incredibly close to them early in the morning. And so my experience tells me that the red light really doesn't bother them if they can even see it at all. Yeah. I have to wonder, I'm sure there's a study out there somewhere about what it is their rods and cones can pick up on, but it sure seems like red. I don't know why red seems to be the thing that I always lean on the most as well. It doesn't feel as intrusive to me. It doesn't screw up your own night vision either. Yeah. So, well, Parker, thanks, man. It's a good question. If you want to leave a question, just go to the show notes, and there's a link in there. Click the send voicemail tab and leave your question, and we will answer it on the air. Thanks, Parker. Yeah. Round of applause for Parker. People are applauding. Yeah. For you. They're going wild. Nice job. Okay. How about the wildlife word, boys? That's the intro to the wildlife word. No, it's not. It is right now. Take that back. Nope. So Austin, just to take you through it, the wildlife word is a multiple choice, and If you win, you get a Mossy Oak BioLogic ball cap.
Oh, you got one.
Nice.
Oh, crud.
Oh,
Man,
give it
I need to
somebody
plan
else.
these out so much better.
Yeah,
I don't do good at it.
All right, let's hear it.
The wildlife word is the pineal gland.
Or is it penal?
No, it's
Well,
not.
Okay.
The pineal gland. Is it a cranial gland allowing deer to dream and make plans for the future? A gland that secretes acid, allowing whitetails to digest pine needles. A gland located on a deer's tail with a citrusy pineapple aroma.
I got diarrhea.
You do. Or D, a gland that tells the pituitary gland to release testosterone to grow antlers.
We always go with lead with the guest. Go ahead, Austin. What do you got?
Against my better judgment and a much funnier answer, I guess I'll go with D. But
Okay.
the pineapple citrus on the rear end sounds really cool.
It's only one way to find out.
I'm going with D as well.
D is correct. So don't go sniffing a deer's butt when you kill one this season to see if it smells like pineapple.
It's not going to smell like
Because it's not
pineapple.
going to smell like pineapple.
And now you've been subjected to the wildlife word of the day. And
Brought to you by
actually,
Dole.
Funny thing, we've gotten feedback on this and people don't like it.
It's weird. I think the problem is with those people.
As in, that's society today. If they got a
It
problem
is
with
society.
it, they are the problem.
Austin, thanks so much for hopping on, man. We really appreciate it.
Hey, yeah, don't be scared to have me on again if I didn't mess up too bad. I'd be glad to hop on here anytime.
No, and I'll FaceTime you tomorrow when we're planting and I have 50 billion questions.
You're going to regret that.
Hey, I have answered a lot of questions from the Cava tractor, so I don't mind it.
I bet. Well, we appreciate you guys down in BioLogic. You've helped us for a long time, like I was saying earlier. I mean, 15, 16 years, whatever it is. I mean, it's I think, I think BioLogic personally, and I don't know the timeline of what seeds have done what, but BioLogic has helped create an entire industry there in the food plot world, realistically, and what you guys, set out to educate and this kind of scientifically proven side of it. And it's not just, hey, we're throwing something out there. It's all the test plots and all the things you guys do ahead of time in the research to put the best product out there. I mean, it does make a difference. So we appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all. Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for tuning in this week. Stay tuned next week when we'll have episode number 172.
Maybe not.
I think we do.
Hope we don't. All right. Till next time. Peace out.
See ya.
We're adding new videos every week, so make sure to click that subscribe button and check out all of our amazing content. This episode of DoD TV was brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's.